Now that you are aware of the kinds of light sources available to us with Blender and Cycles, the next step is figuring out how to use those tools to achieve an appealing light setup. And so to demonstrate this, I'm going to focus on one object, our shader gizmo, deleting these objects on the right side, and then moving our shader gizmo into the center of our frame. And then I'll hit Shift Z in the viewport to enable viewport rendering. And I want to turn my world all the way to black, or click Use Nodes and take my strength to 0, so that we have a fresh slate, no lighting whatsoever. And the 3-point light setup is made of 3 components. First, the key light, then fill light, and finally backlight or rim light. And so we're going to start with the key light. I'm going to add a lamp, area lamp, and move that up so that we can start to see some illumination. I'm going to rename this area key with, let's say, a lamp prefix. All right, now I'm going to jump back to our solid viewport shading, and let's talk about the position of a key light. With a typical 3-point setup, this is going to be in front of our object, aimed directly at it, and then perhaps off to the side a little bit. So that when I jump into my camera view and hit Shift Z, you can see what this orientation gives us. And the purpose of the key lamp is to be the primary source of illumination for the subject. It sets the tone of the image, where in the current position, it's kind of floating in the middle of being neutral and being dramatic. But we can play around with this. I'm going to choose my 3D cursor as the pivot point, and then in the viewport hit RR twice, so that we can start to pull our light around. The further we go to the side, the more dramatic the lighting becomes, with the shadow becoming thicker and more prominent on our surface. If we continue rotating around, it gets more and more dramatic. Whereas if we keep the light towards the front, we're not leaving much to the imagination. Rather, we're lighting the whole thing up very obviously. And so for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to keep it pretty basic and fundamental. Maybe pull it down a little bit so that our shadow creeps backwards, and push it off to the side a little bit more, just to get a little more shadow on that left side. There we go, I think that's fine. Now jump over to our object data properties, and let's try tweaking the size of our area lamp. As we creep up, our shadows will soften. Yeah, I think something like 0.5 is good. I don't want it to be too harsh. And let's enable multiple importance sampling. And then what about our strength? Let's double that to 200. Perhaps that's a little too bright. I actually think 100 was a good value, though 50 is not too bad. A way to determine how strong this light should be is to jump over to the material, and if we take a look at our diffuse color, if we match this value, that's a pretty good indication that our light or lights have a well-balanced intensity. And so this color looks to be a little bit brighter than what we see in our render, so I think 100 was a good value. And I think that's good for our key light. Next we'll look into the fill.